Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. All things Middle-earth here with a deep dive video looking at the commander Éowyn. We're going to be looking at her most ideal use, but also some secondary uses for her. So just in case her respect level is a little bit lower, maybe you don't have so much gear available, you can still get some great use out of this commander. So stay tuned, we're going to break down all of that in just a second. All right, we're going to jump right into it. I'm going to be jumping back and forth from this spreadsheet and the game. This spreadsheet is going to be linked in the description below if you want to reference back to it, but I'm going to kind of show it here and explain how everything works. It might look a little bit overwhelming, but it's very, very simple, and it's going to help you get the most out of your Éowyn regardless of where you have her at. So starting out here, the first thing we're going to look at is skills, and that's one of the three things we're going to look at: skills, troops, and items. So looking here at the skills, there are two columns, B and C. This is going to show her different uses at R5 and then at R0 through 3. So at R5, I have her ranked at S tier, and at R0 through 3, you can say I have her ranked at B tier. Again, this is information we've kind of gathered together in the Discord, which is also linked below. So if you want to join us over there for some of these conversations, join the Discord, shoot me a message, and I'd be happy to add you to the group that's doing different commander reviews. But we kind of all agreed that S tier at R5 seemed fair, and about B tier, so still not bad. She's definitely going to get her best use at R5. So R5 Éowyn, and then I have these numbers next to her abilities that show the priority for her skills, and if there's an asterisk next to it, that means there's kind of a tie, and that just depends on the situation or how you want to use the commander. There's not one that's like a lot better than the other option. So with all that in mind, starting with number 1 being the highest priority, we're going to hop over to the game and look at the commander. All right, so as you saw on the spreadsheet, and I'll kind of keep referencing that throughout, and again, if you want to pull that up and look at it later, you're welcome to do that. White Lady of Rohan at the R5 is going to be the best ability for Éowyn. It's going to, every single round, give all mounted units a 30% HP recovery. Also, for mounted units at the max level effect, you're going to get a stun immunity, which is crazy, crazy good. And so White Lady of Rohan maxed out. That's the first thing you're going to want to do regardless of what, as long as you have her at that respect, that's what you're going to do. There's nothing else that comes close to that. Then we're going to look at Frontline Rescue, which is on round 3. This is going to be for allied melee units. It's going to give them a 300% HP recovery. So those are the first two options you want to go into there. Then the third thing we're going to go into with Éowyn is going to be Rohirrim, and that's going to be this one right here. It says mounted units, they deal an extra 9.6 damage upon inflicting damage, and this is going to be stacked up to 3 times, modified by the speed stat, and we also get an extra 15 might from that one. And then last in this order of how I've gone through things, you're going to do Riding Excellence, which is going to be a damage reduction for mounted units. Now, my Éowyn is at level 37 at respect 10, so I've got a fair amount of points. If you have her at respect 5, maybe she could be up to like level 42, and this would be about where you would have her. I actually should have a couple more points over in Riding Excellence before looking at nobility, but I was testing some different things out. But again, at that kind of like 40, mid 40 level, you should be able to max out White Lady of Rohan, Rohirrim, and one adjacent skill with each of those abilities. So if you're getting her up to 50 and you have higher respect, or maybe you have her in the mid 40s still, but you have even higher respect than I have, you're going to start having some extra points. And now, most likely, you're not going to be able to max out and really get enough benefit from anything else for it to be a huge deal. So this is, again, where you're going to see the most use out of these two. But I will show you what I would go into next if points were very, very abundant here. So for Éowyn, beyond this point of having these points, you have a few options. Number 1, the next option could be to go into Nobility, which is going to do 21% extra damage for men. Now, this one is very situational. I have it ranked a little bit lower than the starting ones because it is situational to men, and there are mounted dwarf and elf type troops that are totally fine to use with Éowyn. And so sometimes this one doesn't get as much use, and so be aware of that. Also be aware of that with Frontline Rescue. The only mounted troop that's not melee is going to be the Bow Knights, and so usually you're not going to have too much of your majority not be melee, but bear in mind that this is also for allied melee units. And so if for some reason you were running a lot more ranged, that were Bow Knights, for example, that were elves, they're not going to get either of these effects. So just be aware of that with your troop compositions. But the next option after the first 4 we talked about is going to be Nobility, followed by, or maybe tied with, which is why it has an asterisk on the sheet, followed by Cleave, again, mostly because you've maxed out Rohirrim. You have ability to max out Cleave and get the most effect from it. And if you were not taking enough men to really justify using nobility, you could definitely look at going for Cleave as a different option. And then after Cleave, the last thing I would look at going into, which again, it really at this point you're looking at if you have Éowyn pretty much maxed out with level and you have a lot of respect. Again, I have her at level 37 at respect 10, which is very, very high. So at the very most, I'm going to get 13 more points. So if I finish maxing out Riding Excellence, that leaves me 11. If I max out Cleave, then that's going to leave me about 4 points at this exact point. So you're going to have them pretty much maxed out and at a respect about 10 or more. But that's where you could look into going into something like Shield Maiden, which again is going to affect melee units only. So this could shift if you are not using as many melee units. If you're using a lot more of the Bow Knights, for example, you could look at going into something like Durnhelm. But for the most part, if you've done the White Lady of Rohan and the Rohirrim trees and you just have extra points, Shield Maiden's going to be fine to go into with that to finish off the build for your Éowyn. Hopping back to the spreadsheet, we're going to now look at the C column here, which is going to show the abilities prioritized for Éowyn if you don't have her at respect 5. So if you have her anywhere from respect 0 to 3. Now, getting the respect 3 skills doesn't change this that much. Again, it gets a little bit situational, but as you can see, we start at 1 and 2, and then if it has an asterisk, again, that means it's tied with something else, whereas I think there could be a build and an argument for both sides, but it didn't seem like either one was like overwhelmingly better than the other one. So starting in that column there, again, this is going to be Éowyn at about a B tier usability. You're going to be going into Rohirrim first, followed by that same Riding Excellence. So since you don't have access to White Lady of Rohan, which again, you'll have access to this regardless if you have the commander, you're going to want to go into Rohirrim and then Riding Excellence first. And then after that, it's where it gets a little bit interesting because just like I said, there are a few different good build options. Number one being Shield Maiden. After Shield Maiden, you could look at finishing up Cleave like we did in the main, the R5 build, or you could look at going into Defensive Stance or Attack Battles, which are all okay, but I think you're going to get the more used out of Shield Maiden, especially if you're using more melee troops. So that's kind of one option. The other option after you do Rohirrim is to go into Durnhelm and something like Cripple, just to help Éowyn do more damage, which at that point does make some of these other abilities a little bit better that she's attacking. But again, it starts to depend on how many points you have available. And if you don't have her at the R5 yet, at level 50 and R4 at the most, you're going to be a little bit limited, but you're going to still be able to do some of everything. So again, but the priority is going to be Rohirrim here with Riding Excellence, and then possibly going into Cleave, especially if you're looking at doing Durnhelm. But there is also, I think, another tree where instead of going after Rohirrim, instead of going into Durnhelm, you could go into Shield Maiden. But I think that's kind of just user's choice if you want to have Éowyn doing a little bit more damage, or if you want to have your melee units taking a little bit less hits. But there have been some talks in the Discord about how Éowyn doing damage with something like Durnhelm kind of has been more valuable than the protection you get for your melee troops from something like Shield Maiden. So just keep that in mind. I don't think it's something that's far and away better, but I think it's kind of up for debate after that Rohirrim ability. So again, those are the skills for Éowyn. If you want to look at them at the sheet, again, they're down below. We have the B and the C columns here. They're separate rankings here at the different respect levels. And then the priority, the asterisks kind of being areas where I felt like there wasn't an overwhelming amount of votes for those things being better than others, but some, you know, the 1 and the 2 being very for sure every single time. Next for Éowyn, we're going to look at gear, and in this spreadsheet I have the 4 different types of gear laid out here with some suggestions for each one, but obviously this is just going to depend on what you have available. So for Éowyn being a mounted commander, they benefit a lot from speed, and then might is very, very good on them as well. So we want to give her items that help with one of those two things. Focus isn't a great item for Éowyn, so don't worry too much about that, but obviously it's better than nothing if you don't have anything else. Starting off with the weapon, the most ideal weapon for Éowyn is going to be the Reach of the Riddimark, and that's going to do might, speed, and then you get army speed for mounted units. So this is a fantastic item for any mounted commander. So the Reach of the Riddimark, and then there's a couple different options for the abilities. Cleave being solid, Accelerate being okay, but Might of Cavalry probably being the best option there. But again, depending on what you have, if you only have one of these, you can't really be that picky about what ability you have. So trying to think through if you are going to end up using an ability like Durnhelm, if you choose to use that over something like Shield Maiden towards the end of your build, something that helps the commander do more damage or perform an additional attack becomes suddenly a little bit better. So if you have Accelerate, again, if you have, enough to strengthen this all the way, you probably are going to have some different options to choose from. But if you do have Accelerate, and Éowyn's going to have even a 15% chance to, in the first 3 rounds, attack twice, that Durnhelm could become a lot more useful. Same with the Cleave here. But again, overall, the Reach of the Red Mark is going to be a fantastic, fantastic item for Éowyn. Next, we're going to look at the Cutlass, which is a purple item, which is going to be a lot more obtainable for most people. Even if you're free to play, chances are you can get a Cutlass through the exchange or just get a lucky pull. And so the Cutlass is also going to focus Might and Speed, which is primarily the things we're looking at. And then we can look at the abilities, and obviously the more options you have, the more specific you can get with your build. But the melee Might's going to be solid, and Flay is going to be solid, where the commander is going to ignore 30% of the target's defense. And again, these are maxed out stats. Overconfidence and Smite are not going to be great on Éowyn because Smite has to do with focus damage. Éowyn has low focus, and Overconfidence is for pirates, which we're not using with Éowyn in this build. So there are some gear suggestions for the weapon for Éowyn being purple and gold. Again, if you have something like right now, I actually just have a battle axe on her that runs completely Might. This is not bad. It's just not the most ideal. So don't feel bad if you don't have these exact things. You could look through, and you can even look at different ones to see, like the Ranger's Dagger, for example, is going to have Might and Speed. This is exactly the stats you want to have on her. So a Ranger's Dagger strengthened all the way is going to be very, very solid for Éowyn. So don't sleep on something like the Ranger's Dagger that's blue just because it is blue. If this is strengthened all the way, the Might and the Speed benefits are going to be solid for Éowyn. And the Ranger's Dagger is going to have abilities just 2, so you kind of keep it simple for either melee units or men. So again, just depending on the compositions you're running, you're probably going to run more melee units than you are going to be running men units, but it just depends. Those could be kind of nice as well. Okay, moving on to the armor for Éowyn, I've got 2 suggestions here. Number 1, the gold item is going to be the Ranger's Shroud. Again, this is going to give Might and Speed here. The army attack for range is not that great, but again, the Might and Speed is what we're looking at. It is fantastic. This ability here, the strength from Dexterity, is going to be solid, as well as the improved Shroud, and the resistance is not bad either. Again, if you're not a heavy spender, you might just have one of these gold items, so you can't really be picky about what ability you have. There are some that are not as good, like Contemplate. We don't really need to add focus to Éowyn because her focus is so low, and that's not what we're looking at. So Contemplate's not great, and Resilience of Archers is not great. The rest are fine, and again, once you start refining some of these, they start to get really, really good. But the Ranger's Shroud is solid, especially on a character like Éomer, but we're talking about Éowyn today. And then secondarily to that, for the purple gear, I would look at the Scout's Mail, which is solid. It's got Might and it's got Speed on it. And then the ability Shroud, I think, is fantastic. It's for 3 allied units. They have up to a 60% chance of avoiding the first instance of damage. This is fantastic because it's purple, so it's not going to be as hard to refine and get that chance up a little bit more from that starting 10%. But with a character like Éowyn who's mounted, if you use fast troops with her, she's going to go first. You're going to attack, weaken the enemy army. Then the army's going to attack and have a greater than 50% chance at this point to avoid that damage, and then get to go again and weaken the army. So the army is going to be significantly weakened before they actually do any damage to you, which is going to be really, really helpful. The deafness to just give the commander speed's not going to hurt either. And tame is just for trackers, so that's no good. And you don't really, the ranged unit buff isn't great, or the damage reduction for ranged units, because it's that the only unit you're going to be having with her is bow knights. So not amazing there, not bad, but I would definitely go for the Shroud and then maybe deafness in second place for that. But again, still just focusing on that Might and Speed. All right, next up for Éowyn, we have her headpiece, her helmet, which is going to be the Horseman's Helm. I'm not even going to suggest a gold item for this one, because while there are some good items you could pick, like honestly the Cask of Pride or the Cask of the Submerged Isle, those are gold items that are solid, and if you have those strengthened up, they could be very good. But the Horseman's Helm is just made for these mounted commanders. You get the Might, you get the Speed, you get defense for mounted units, and then for Éowyn specifically, we're going to go for the Resolve ability, especially if you have her at R5, and eventually, even if you don't have her at R5 now, the goal is going to be to get her to R5. But at R5 in the first 3 rounds, she is going to have Madness immunity from the Resolve, and then she has Stun immunity from the White Lady of Rohan ability. So that's going to make her a lot more tricky to deal with. Obviously, warding is stun immunity, which if you don't have her at R5, that's fine. It's just for the first 2 rounds. But if you have her at R5 and you're running warding, you're not getting the effects of the helmet. So the allied mounted unit damage reduction is not bad, but we really want to focus on Resolve as the main one there, which again, I didn't have one until this point. So right now I do have warding on her, so I'm not getting the benefits of that, but I did actually just get one right here. And so that's something we can look at as well. And last but not least, we are looking at the accessories. Now, there are a lot of good accessories in the game, a lot of ones that do just a lot of different things. You know, this Int Calabash here on Theoden with the might and the army HP is solid. The Night Star is very good, which is going to have some might and speed. Still primarily focus on that one, so it's solid. The ability on the Night Star is kind of the better thing here with the tactical mark. We have the all allies gain pursuit, and maxed out, this is going to have a 30% chance of causing max damage, but we're more concerned with the pursuit there. So the Night Star is fantastic, but again, there's a multitude of these items, and I think I've found them kind of hard to gather. So something like the Hithlane, the Elven Rope is going to be a very, very good option for Éowyn, because you're going to have some might here. You're going to have HP for the army, and you can get the mend ability. So just like this one here, I just got it from the exchange because I had not been able to find one yet with the mend on it. But put something like this on Éowyn, it's going to be fantastic. Again, if you have gotten lucky and you have something like a Night Star, I mean, again, a lot of the gold accessories are very good. So you can probably make it work with Éowyn depending on the ability it has, and as long as you get some might or speed in there. But something like the Hithlane is a lot more accessible. You can keep your eyes in the exchange to see if one comes across and get it. And again, hopefully get a lucky roll and get mend, because the other abilities are not that great. You have Siege of Elves, Bane of Orcs, and Maneuver, which those are just not great. So you want to go for mend. Again, if you don't get mend, just don't refine it yet. Hold on to it and keep strengthening it. And then once you get mend, you can transfer it all to one that has, which is what I need to do on her right now, actually. So again, those are going to be the 4 item recommendations, or a couple of recommendations for each item slot for Éowyn. And last but not least, we are going to look at the different troop types that I recommend to use with Éowyn. Now, in this list specifically, I do not have any tier 4 units laid out. Obviously, tier 4 mounted troops are going to be best with Éowyn. So that's why I have down here factions that the commander will benefit the most from: Rohan, Gondor, and Angmar. If you're playing non-RP, those are tier 4 mounted troops that are going to be fantastic with Éowyn because they're tier 4 mounted troops. So it's kind of a no-brainer with those, but they're expensive and they're not as accessible, especially if you're playing in the early game. And so something like these are all tier 3 mounted units. They're going to be fantastic. I would suggest having Bow Knights in pretty much any composition you run, because it's the only ranged mounted troop, and it does extra damage to large units like trolls and things like that, which you're going to come across a lot. So I would always recommend running Bow Knights. And Cavaliers, I think, are fantastic. They have the first round extra damage ability, and then any combination of the Bree Riders, Cataphracts, or Ram Riders, depending on what you have available. Because depending on who you're playing as, right now, I'm playing as Lyndon right now on this server. You're going to have the Bow Knights and then the Cavaliers available first, so you could just run both of those. And then maybe once you get the Cataphract, you could run those. And again, it's going to be a while before you get the Dwarves up and going and have the Ram Riders for them. But again, it's mounted. Nothing other than mounted with Éowyn, and you're going to do fine. And this applies to tier 2 and tier 1 as well. So light cavalry or the Outriders, I probably wouldn't spend too much gold upgrading your abilities here. I would save that for when you get tier 3 units, but you can definitely start by running light cavalry and the horseback archers. Or again, depending on what faction you're playing as, you might have a different option available. If you're playing as Rohan, you're going to have the Rohirrim cavalry available first. If you're playing as the dwarves and using Éowyn, you're going to have the goat riders available a little bit sooner. But again, to get it leveled up enough to unlock these and get them going at a reasonable time is going to take a minute. So mounted troops, and you're gonna do fine with Éowyn. But that's gonna pretty much do it for our video on Éowyn. Again, the goal of this video is to show her use at any different respect level. So if you're here and you just unlocked her, you just full pulled Éowyn, hopefully you find some use out of this video and are able to start using her right away to do a good job in the game, and you can start working towards her R5 since it is her best use. Same thing with gear. Maybe you're a free-to-play player and you only have a few pieces of purple gear. That's giving you an idea of what to look out for, and you'll know to hold on to something if you get it, if you pull, you know, the Hith lane or something like the Scout's mail from a chest. You'll know to hang on to that because it's going to go really well on Éowyn. So that's going to do it for me in this one. Again, the link to this spreadsheet is going to be in the description below, so if you want to check that out, feel free to do so. And over on Discord is where we're having conversations like this, where people, about 40 people in this group, are able to put their input in on these commanders so we can get a really good idea of how they're best used at any level. So if you want to join us over there, the Discord's linked below as well, and I'd love to have you come join the conversation. But that's going to do it for me in this one, and I'll see you all in a future video.